So first of all, welcome everybody to our online event entitled Inclusion, Opening the Doors to Non-Russell Group Universities. My name is James Austin. I'm one of the directors here at Cohesion. And as you'll be aware, we've traditionally run these events in person. And obviously, hopefully before too long again, we can look to reinstate the face-to-face element and probably more importantly, being able to share a drink or two together afterwards. But in all seriousness, these online forums have proved to be a really popular alternative. And it would be remiss of me, I suppose, at this stage, not to mention that we're going to be hosting another one in a couple of months' time, where we're going to be investigating what impact COVID-19 has had on students, hiring firms, and also early talent programs. So it's great to see so many familiar names and faces joining us today, but also fantastic to see a number of new names and faces too. So for those of you who are new to Cohesion, good morning and welcome to our session today. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get going. In a minute, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, Greg. We really want to encourage an open discussion with hopefully lots of questions which can be addressed to any of the panel. And if possible, I think it's probably going to be easier if we can post any questions that you may have in the chat function, and also, if possible, who the question's being addressed to. So hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end of the session to run through any questions that you may have. If I could also ask for everyone to turn their microphones off, I think by the look of things, now most people are doing that, but I think that will help reduce any sort of background noise that we may have throughout the presentation. So why this event and why now? As many of you will be aware, Cohesion is a market-leading provider of recruitment services purely within the early talent sector. As such, the topic of, I suppose, diversity and specifically inclusion has always been centre stage. But we are noticing that the meaning and how, I suppose, the words are defined and interpreted are changing. So I remember a few years back, we held a roundtable up in London with the event held and centred around the topic of diversity, where the key theme was gender. And whilst this is absolutely as important as ever, we have noticed that recent current affairs, I suppose, has led to a broadening agenda where organisations are actively taking step changes to change the way that they attract and recruit candidates. Ethnicity, social mobility, and even neurodiversity all now contribute to running an early talent programme that is truly inclusive, removing any barriers to entry and supporting candidates at each stage of the process. So today especially, we'll be looking at the breadth and range of universities that organisations engage with, and as a result, how factors such as social mobility can be improved. At Cohesion, we do a huge amount of work when it comes to local school, college, and university engagement. And it's one of the modules where we're noticing an increasing amount of demand from our clients. But it's an absolutely critical factor in developing a sustainable and talent pipeline. And hopefully, through the topics that we're going to be discussing with you today, some of this will be evident. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over now to Dr. Greg Walker, CEO at the Million Plus Group, who can introduce his organisation and share with us some of the insight that he may have. So Greg, over to yourself.
Thanks very much, James, and just want to reiterate my thanks to you for convening this meeting. It's been exceptionally useful to gather your colleagues on the call to ensure that this topic is properly addressed. I'm just going to run through some slides before you, colleagues, just for 10 or 15 minutes, and just to chat through the perspective from modern universities. I represent an organisation called Million Plus, which is the Association for Modern Universities, and we represent 24 universities in England and Scotland that were founded or given university title from the early 1990s. The former polytechnics and former institutes of higher education that became universities in the early 1990s. 1990s. The word million plus simply refers to the number of students we have every year studying with us. We have over 1 million students, which gives us a sense of scale as to how big and how significant a player we are in the higher education market. And so just wanted to obviously set the scene by thinking about how exactly we should conceive and think about inclusion, and how we might think about why we want a diverse graduate workforce, and how we might act to ensure that we deliver on those aims. So I think, just very simply, there are 3 fundamental reasons why you might be considering reasons to recruit inclusively, i.e. from all universities rather than just a small subset. That's just simply to reflect your stakeholders and your customer base. That's extremely important in having a staff who understands their client base and who understands exactly what people are looking for in the products and services you're selling. Secondly, in terms of the responsibilities, we all have corporate responsibility. We are committed by legislation, Companies Act, and likewise to take into account societal needs and societal demands. And boards of directors are now, quite rightly, in the last 20 years, been much more conscious of the corporate responsibility agenda. And this inclusion agenda, in terms of having a diverse staffing base, is a critical part of that. And something that James had just mentioned as well, neurodiversity is the third point, I think, cognitive diversity, as some people call it. This is something that the World Economic Forum has really highlighted as being really essential for organizations when they think about how they staff their organization, is having a plurality of perspectives, worldviews, experiences of life. And without that, you can just easily regress into an easy or lazy sort of groupthink. And that way, colleagues will be aware you can get into all sorts of challenges and problems regarding sort of a very hidebound view of life. And again, not really understanding your stakeholders and your customers. And that's why having a very strong and diverse group of staff in your organization is particularly essential in 2021. So just to say a little bit about the modern universities that our organization represents. One of the organizations that's in our membership is presenting very shortly, the University of East London. But we have an exceptionally diverse student body. Our university members by far have about 96% of our entrants come from state schools. 2/3 of our student body come from so-called low participation backgrounds, in terms of where they were recruited from, in terms of parts of the country, areas where income and wealth are a little lower than some other parts of the UK. We have a lot of mature students, so students who are over the age of 21 when they first go to university, so people in their 20s and 30s who perhaps didn't think the academic track was initially for them. They go back into education a little bit later in life and benefit from HE in that way. And crucially, we have 2/3 of all Black students in the UK. Obviously, the news overnight from America, it's very significant and very positive. And the last 12 months, I think, has highlighted just how important inclusion of Black communities is. And I think there is a much greater consciousness now of the importance of having a racially diverse workforce, as well as having gender diversity and diversity in other protected characteristics that the Equality Act mentions. So our universities are the personification of diversity. It's an essential part of our mission as universities to include students from all different types of backgrounds. And that's basically an essential part of who we are and what we do. So in terms of, again, the rationale of recruitment from a wider group of universities, I mean, I just point to some of the comment from the Times here, the fact that, the last sentence on the snip in the slide talks about, there's, I think, a lazy assumption that academic success and a monocultural recruitment pattern are sort of necessarily connected. But actually, when one looks at quite closely at the outcomes from different types of universities, you see that actually a lot of things are related simply to your prior attainment at 16 or 18. And high tariff universities in the lingo, or the more elite or prestigious universities simply ramp up their entry requirements as a rationing device, if you like, and all you get effectively is a form of academic selection. And that's what drives, in many respects, perception of prestige and the like in terms of the graduate recruitment market. And I would say that we need to take a wider view of that. I think the Sunday Times and the Times league table on social inclusion and social diversity help to do that, and it's worth just flagging that. And I'd say it does not reflect the quality of the experience, the educational experience at the university's concern. So it just reflects initially the academic attainment of the students at 16 or 18, which I think after 3 years of experiencing high quality higher education, people come out having caught up. It's got a lot of evidence to say that students from social backgrounds can catch up quite quickly after 3 years at universities, including modern universities. So just in terms of further reasons, I think this is not just an add-on extra that companies and employers should be thinking about. It is now, I think, baseline good corporate responsibility, good practice. The Social Mobility Foundation here have long, for a number of years now, following up Alan Milburn's work, have been issuing reports and sort of guidance about how employers can do this. And certainly in relation to COVID-19, as you'll see in some of the recommendations from the 2020 report, there is an encouragement and a serious encouragement for employers to now go to diversify their attraction models in their terminology in the recommendation above. So, to go beyond the usual suspects of universities that they recruit from, and, this is the time to capitalize on that. You can obviously see some of the recommendations in that report, and I will highlight a couple of them a little bit later in the presentation. But this now is mainstream stuff that you'll be aware of this, and this is something that any business that is seriously interested in corporate responsibility will be very deeply interested in, I would hope. And just to say that we often get talk of higher education. Universities often gets dominated by league tables. And the league tables usually focus on the component elements of the traditional league tables, whether it's Times Higher or sort of some of the international league tables, focus very much on research. So the quality of research that the professors do, rather than necessarily the quality of the education, and the weighing of, if you like, the social mobility that the universities engender when the students are at them. And there is there's some interesting antidotes to the sort of traditional league tables, where you often get Oxford and Cambridge at the top, then Russell Group next. An analysis just presented actually last month by the Higher Education Policy Institute sort of tried to aggregate different variables and did that sort of in an impartial way based on a United States of America social mobility index. And hey ho, look what happens. It's actually quite an interesting and diverse picture, as you can see on the screen. Actually, it's not just modern universities. Some pre-92 old universities do really well, like Queen Mary University of London, which is part of the Russell Group. But, you can see a lot of my members there, Bolton, University of Wolverhampton, London, South Bank University. When you measure value added, if you like, and the net impact that higher education has on students, you then see a very different picture, colleagues, to what you traditionally get from some of the sort of league tables that we would look at and default to. So yeah, this is not about different types of universities being good or bad. As you can see from that particular league table, there are some traditional universities like the LSE that do very well as well. But it's just, I think, taking a broader picture to try and have a holistic view of the contributions that different types of universities can make, and therefore who you should be thinking of recruiting from. And just to reiterate, really, that in terms of your social responsibilities and the impact that social background has, I don't want to get academic about this, but there's been a lot of interesting and important research This year is an LSE professor, Sam Friedman, who published this book last year. And he just basically sort of ran through all sorts of interesting analyses of people's background, how they end up, where they, sort of factors causing career success. And when he crunched all the numbers and the like, a lot of sort of career success is based not on your underlying, if you like, ability or your sort of your natural talent, but is based on the social advantages you get from your upbringing. And it's not, that won't surprise many of you, no doubt, on the call, but there really is a strong evidence base now to say that actually, if you just think merit and meritocracy, we just hire the people with the highest exam scores from the most prestigious universities. That equals merit. That's the fair way to recruit people. Actually, when you look in detail at what's going on in society and how people get to where they are, that's really not a sort of meritocratic picture at all. There are all sorts of factors that play into people's success in life, as you would expect and imagine. And this work sort of I think lays to rest the idea that we all start at an equal point in the equality of opportunity race, so to speak. We're all obviously have different advantages at different times of life from our social background. So I think in terms of corporate responsibility, that really has to be borne in mind, especially if you do want a diverse workforce that reflects society and reflects the values that you as a company would like to project to your customers. So just really to conclude, colleagues, I've only got a couple of minutes left in terms of what we can do, where we go from here, how we can improve things concretely going forward. And I think the best, I don't want to give my own sort of off the cuff recommendations as to what to do or where to go. Many of you will be aware of the good practice here, and we'll be doing that already, which is really praiseworthy. But there are some key recommendations and actions that employers can be taking. These are just a selection or a small selection of recommendations from the Social Mobility Foundation, as I say, which is an independent charity. It's not connected to any particular universities, so there's no vested interest on their part for favouring any section of the university sector. But you can just see and read those at your leisure. But I mean, the obvious key points to bear in mind is the impact of COVID-19. There's going to be perhaps an increasing gap in attainment between social groups and racial groups, and I think that really has to be borne in mind when you're recruiting in 2 or 3 years' time cohorts coming out of university. There is possible reinforcement of social exclusion coming through as a result of COVID-19. So some of the things like taking a second look at applicants, blind recruitment, which a lot of you will be doing. For those you don't hire, but you see capability and talent there, potentially, perhaps having some form of support, mentoring or internship for them to give them a leg up in what might be otherwise quite difficult circumstances. And make sure that you perhaps consider the apprenticeship model, the higher and degree apprenticeship model, which is a growing sort of way of doing higher education. It also means you can use your apprenticeship levy funding, which you have to pay come what may, and the apprenticeship route can be a way of broadening and diversifying your graduate workforce, which is an excellent aim, as we've just been discussing. So I won't go any further, as I've had my 10-15 minutes is up, colleagues, but thank you for your time, and thank you again, James, for hosting this webinar. This is obviously an extremely important topic, and I'm happy to be able to answer your questions or answer any challenges in the chat later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. That was really clear and concise overview of your organisation, and I also think, I suppose, some of the challenges that I think that we're all now facing in the early talent arena. Later on in the presentation, in sort of 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that, we're actually going to be showing a short clip of a student that's recently applied on a graduate programme, and I think some of the challenges that the industry faces is absolutely recognised in his short video, and sort of echoes a lot of the points that you made there. So thank you for that. interestingly, Million Plus, I suppose, is an entity that a couple of years ago I didn't really know a huge amount about. But virtually every day now, I suppose, I anecdote your organisation and the universities that obviously form your group, and obviously the great work that you're doing. So thank you very much for that, Greg. Next on the list, we've got Josh and Lucy from GSK. I think this is a firm that really doesn't need much of an introduction, so I don't want to steal the thunder. So if that's okay, I'm now going to pass you, I think it's over to Josh next, who's going to talk through some of the slides and thoughts that they've prepared in advance of today. So Josh, over to you.
I will.
Thanks very much. I think it's Lucy.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. So thanks so much for having us, everyone. I'm Lucy. I'm the head of early talent recruitment at GSK, and joined by Josh, who I will let introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Josh. I work as the early talent attraction specialist at GSK. So yeah, nice to meet you all.
Great. So yeah, thanks, as I said, for having us today. We're here to talk a little bit about some of the changes we've made at GSK, what we've seen. We're not purporting by any means to be experts in this space, unlike Greg. We're very much, early in our journey, and just wanted to share some of the lessons we've learned so far. So I'm going to have my Chris Whitty moment and say, next slide, please. Thank you very much. So just to give a little bit of kind of context to where we were at the start of last year's campaign, GSK has always had very strong positive intent around inclusion. We had a very strong inclusive approach in terms of many diversity metrics. So we had a strengths-based process, so that's recruiting much more on potential, what students are good at and what they enjoy, rather than focusing on prior experience. Wherever possible, we were removing barriers like academic grades, so trying to remove a 2-1 entry grade for a degree, etc. Taking out prior work experience, whether that's requiring it or limiting it either, so making sure that mature students and career changers also have access to our programs. We do operate blind recruitment, so very strictly when we come to sort of shortlisting for assessment centres and things like that, those decisions are made without being able to necessarily associate candidates with other diversity metrics, or in fact, their work history, etc. when it comes then to assessing at assessment centre. We work with a range of attraction partners who have delivered a diverse student base into our programs. And we had started to trial partnerships with universities that we'd not previously worked with. So I would say probably in the vein of dipping our toes in the water. But relatively few of our candidates were coming from non-Russell Group universities, and those that were probably coming from the more elite institutions within that category. So not perhaps those modern universities that we've been talking about. So as we came into last year's campaign, we'd already had the intention that this was something we wanted to progress, we wanted to develop further. But of course, as I'm sure many of you experienced over the last summer, all the issues arising with Black Lives Matter had really caused our organisation to refocus efforts, particularly around ethnic diversity, but it certainly had shone a lens on a number of different criteria we wanted to review. So we took some steps to really try and move this forward further, and that was evaluating each step of our assessment process, making sure that no groups had adverse impact against them, that we could ensure that no part of our process was favouring students from more advantaged backgrounds, reducing the attraction channels that drive volume without diversity. So simply adding diverse candidates into a very high volume pipeline was not necessarily driving the change we needed. So actually reducing some of those volume channels have helped us. And then finally, we wanted to make some significant changes to our target school criteria. And the main thing we did was we really shifted away from looking at past performance, which, as a long-time early talent recruiter, felt kind of anti-intuitive. But we really wanted to look at, instead of where have we performed well before, which is possibly quite a self-fulfilling measure, where do we find the students we want to recruit? Which universities can deliver the diversity of pipeline we want to see in the subject areas we want to recruit from, and be really, really targeted with that? So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Josh, who will talk more about how we approach this and some of the results we've seen so far.
Yeah, thanks very much. And yeah, thanks again for having us. So my role at GSK is primarily looking at how we're advertising our early talent roles, looking after our campus events, our university partnerships, and everything in that kind of space. So I am, yeah, very passionate about this topic. And I'm also quite excited that University of East London are here and speaking after us, because that's where I worked before joining GSK. So I've seen kind of firsthand some of the great students that they have. So yeah, as I say, this is a topic that I am really excited to be chatting about with you today. So yeah, as Lucy mentioned, we're going to look at back at our campus attraction strategy from last time round. I think a lot is often said on calls like this and similar sorts of things with recruiters about all the different ways how employers can engage with candidates, social media, engaging them more directly. But we're actually still seeing, we've seen this year and in previous years, that universities are still and always are the main sources of applications for candidates to our programs. So events on campus, university careers services, university jobs boards are always really, really important to us. And I think having a good campus strategy is definitely necessary to reach the students that you actually want to as effectively as you can. So as Lucy mentioned, one of our kind of main aims this year was to reach as wide a pool of candidates as we can, and therefore it was pretty clear that we needed to have a wider pool of universities we were engaged with and targeting. I don't necessarily like the term target universities. I know that's used quite a lot, and I sometimes use it. But yeah, it's not. I don't necessarily think that's always the most helpful. So we kind of looked at student population data for some of the UK universities, rather than looking at some of our own internal data regarding some of the universities where we've been successful at in the past. And we primarily kind of considered the diversity of student populations, but also some of those universities that are located right next to our sites that we hadn't really engaged with before, which seemed a bit crazy to me. So actually the vast majority of universities that we engaged with this year were non-Russell Group universities, almost all of them, in fact. A couple of these, as Lucy said, we had engaged with a little bit in the past, but most of these, the majority, we were working with for the first time ever. So we tried to use the fact that everything was virtual for this time around to really widen that pool, increase the number of universities we're working with, not just have a kind of a closed pool of target universities. It was much easier, I think, to take a few risks, do some events at universities we hadn't worked with before, when everything's going to be virtual, when everything's going to be online. You don't have to take a train 5 hours across the country to a university you haven't worked with before, and you don't know if the event's going to be good, which I think was quite fortunate. We also put together a slightly larger schedule of events for this time round, without those kind of logistical constraints of the travel and all that kind of thing, which sounded like a great idea. We had about 40 or 50 different events within a couple of weeks in our kind of key period of late September, early October, that kind of time, which again sounded like a great idea. I was, regretting that almost immediately after doing like 3 or 4 events a day by about day 2. And it's surprisingly how tiring some of these virtual events are. And you think you're just logging in at home, but it's not. It is actually just as tiring as doing them in person, I think. But yeah, we've seen some really great and really positive outcomes. It is kind of the first proper step for us. I'm not going to say we've completely cracked it, but I think we've seen some really positive outcomes and things coming out of it. So we've seen a 56% increase in our placement applications from the universities that we've kind of newly worked with this year, which is a huge increase. We've seen significant increases in diversity of applicants to our placement roles. I think it's around 20% increase in graduate hires from candidates from ethnic minority backgrounds as well, which is really, really great to see. So it's a really positive first step. And as I say, we haven't, absolutely cracked it, but I think some really great outcomes that we've seen so far. If we go to the next one, please. So a couple of other considerations for us for future. I think it is important that us as recruiters don't see those university partnerships as like a one-way relationship where we just come and do events with them and we, take their best candidates and take applications from them. I think it's very important. Sorry, if you go back to the last slide, to see it as a two-way relationship. I think sharing data, sharing best practice, insights, support with universities, I think is really important to get that kind of employability on their students' agenda. I think we've got a couple of examples there on the right about some of the data that we share with universities that we engage with. So at the end of each cycle, sharing quite a lot of data in terms of the number of applications, number of hires, the different business areas their students are applying to at GSK, where their students are doing well and falling out of the process, that kind of thing. I think kind of a two-way relationship there is quite important. I think working with universities that, in the past haven't been traditionally targeted by the larger employers, I think is a great thing to do kind of industry-wide as well, particularly I think in terms of getting employability in front of the first year students, particularly around industrial placements. There's some great universities that really do have industrial placements right at the top of their agenda in terms of student employability. And so there's some other universities that really don't have it. And I think to be able to level that playing field and get in front of students as early as possible, I think will impact on their students' employability and sort of graduate roles they're coming out of university into as well, looking a bit more in the future. So this isn't like a quick win. It's not necessarily, we didn't think we're going to come and do a few events at a few new universities and completely change where our applicants are coming from and and completely turn that on its head. We've got, we have had in the past really long-standing relationships with a lot of great universities, and it wasn't going to change that balance overnight, but I think we've definitely seen a kind of step in the right direction. I think we've tried to show that GSK is open to all talent in terms of doing this, and I think we've also seen there's some really great students at these universities coming through that I think in previous years we may have missed out on. So I think it's been a really good first step for us. We want to go to the next one. I think Lucy's gonna wrap up.
I will indeed. Thanks very much. So really just to kind of summarize what we've been talking through today, I think the lessons we feel we've learned from this process is, as I touched on before, past campaigns ROI has always been a kind of classic go-to measure of where should we continue to recruit, where we've been successful in the past. But of course, you are going to keep seeing the same universities coming up on your list, because unsurprisingly, the universities you recruit from are probably the ones you're investing a lot of your time and resource in. And added to that, students from less privileged backgrounds are probably more likely to have a bigger knowledge gap in the first place. So you do need to invest more and in a different way, I think, with students who have not maybe had parental influence, have not had the same kind of role models who can tell them what this particular work experience is like. And we saw some data last year from Rare Recruitment that shows that 10% of state schools produce 53% of applicants to top graduate schemes. And I think to just even look at private school versus state school as your measure of privilege does really cover up the fact that in a lot of cases there is still a big gap in terms of what different students will have experienced. So to summarize, poor ROI doesn't always indicate that the university shouldn't be targeted. It might indicate that the way you're approaching them, the type of information you're sharing, is maybe not working out quite as well in there, and the mechanism for doing that. So you can't necessarily just lift and shift the content that you would have presented to students at Durham to students from a university that maybe have not had ad infinitum employers coming on campus and presenting to them already. I would also say, as Josh talked about, university relationships take investment over time. You can't expect that 1 year turning up on campus and you didn't get the increase in applications you were hoping for means that it's not worth going back there. It's as much about understanding the students' perspectives and what they need from you and what you can do to encourage them and build their confidence in applying to your brand and build their interest in applying to your brand. A greater focus on careers education, I think, is also important. So a lot of times by the time a student's gone to university, they've already made decisions about the subjects they're studying and the clubs that they're taking part in as what they think is going to help them onto the career path they already have in mind. It can be much harder at this stage already to really influence people to understand the different career opportunities available. And certainly for us, some of our careers are less conventional to many students. Yes, we've got all the traditional business roles in finance and HR and marketing that people might be familiar with, but roles like lab science and manufacturing and engineering are not going to be roles necessarily that all students will have considered. It's an obvious point, so forgive me for putting it at the end, but of course school and university partnerships is one aspect to try and target and shift the dial in the applications coming into your process. It is really important, if you're going to invest all that time in building that pipeline, that you are also considering the process that follows, and that you're not just inviting a load of students in and setting them up to fail by bringing them into a process that's going to disadvantage them. So really important to make sure that you are looking end to end at your process and not just that top of the funnel. So that was really it from us. I think we'll be coming back later potentially for some questions at the end. Thanks so much for listening.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Team GSK. I think what you've described in terms of some of your, I suppose, your proactivity and some of the steps that you're taking is really interesting. I think what's I suppose quite obvious for everyone on the call is what you're putting in place is really kind of best practice. But it's not, as we all know, it's not very common practice. And it's amazing how many organizations we engage with and speak to that aren't doing some of the things that I suppose to many on the call are probably quite obvious. And I think it's great to see that stat about the sort of 56% uplift in candidates. I know we're saving questions for the end, but it'd be great to understand how that translates in terms of where the offers come to. But no, thank you very much for your time and your contribution there. So next on our list of panelists is Charisse at the University of East London. It was great hearing Greg's overview of the Million Plus group and the work obviously that's being done within the forum there. And I think what Charisse is going to talk through now is how some of that sort of sharing of best practice is actually shaping activity at a local level. So knowing Charisse and obviously what her team are doing down at the University of East London, I'm sure it will encourage some of the organisations online today to probably get in touch directly with you. But Charisse, if we hand over to you and we can go from there.
Thank you, James. Hi, everyone. So I'm Charisse, and I'm the Director of Careers and Student Enterprise at the University of East London. And yeah, that was really great, Lucy and Josh, to hear your perspective from GSK and yours as well, Greg, because it really kind of echoes a lot of what I'm going to be saying. So just to give a little bit of information about our student population to start with. So as Greg said, it kind of again echoes what his slides were saying. Around 70% of our students are from Black or ethnic minority background. 45% of our students are their first in the family to go to university. We have over 150 nationalities. 12% of our students have a declared disability. 70% of our students achieve good honors, which is a first or a 2-1. And we have 68%, really high percentage of mature students, which in HE terms is students that are aged 21 or over. So a little bit around the university and our commitment to equality, diversity, and inclusion. So we are the top ranking university according to Times Higher Education for reducing inequalities. We have won awards for gender equality, for race equality, and we have opened in 2019 the Office for Institutional Equity, which is the first of its type in UK higher education. And what the office has been open for is to create a sort of institutional leadership and to create an inclusive and equitable environment and an anti-racist establishment. So the office works really hard with our staff and our students to support them to eliminate discrimination across the university. And they provide EDI training and initiatives and events for students and for staff and for external organizations. We are a post-92 university and established in 1898 as a polytechnic, as Greg mentioned, one of the new or modern universities. Right, so University of East London is careers first, careers-led university. So careers are front and center of everything that we do. It's recognized that our students, they need a lot of support in terms of their career development. So we have embedded a employability module, which is sort of more than just employability. So it's looking really holistically at what students need to equip them for roles in Industry 4.0. So these are the 8 competencies that we've based our module on, and we embed elements of industry connections, community connections, so projects within our local community, entrepreneurship, education, enterprise across the university. So not just for students that want to start their own businesses, but teaching them how to think in an entrepreneurial way and being innovative. So this is embedded, all of our students take a module at every level. It's a mandatory module. And this is to create that sort of equality of opportunity for students. Many of our students are time poor. They have work, part-time work, they have families. So this is a way to ensure that all of students have equal access to quality careers provision. So, I mean, I've been at the university for around 6 years, and I started in employer engagement. And when I started, we were sort of scratching around to get employers to come onto campus, to attend our events. And there has been a dramatic change over the last couple of years, which has been extremely positive. And, so we took the step to, our careers fairs. We had KPMG, we had Ernst & Young, and, they had lines, right across the room to speak to them. But unfortunately, this was not turning around to our graduates actually securing roles with their organizations or passing through even the application stages. And some time ago, there was a Board of Governor meeting, and they challenged our university executive board to say how many of our students are actually securing roles with the Times top 100 graduate employers. And we did a bit of research over the last 2 years. The number was only 12%, and many of those students were working with the NHS. So we didn't have the sort of high profile employers, the aspirational employers. Our students weren't getting through onto those processes. So the sort of typical career structure of providing insight to students through events and talks wasn't going to work to see the results that we wanted for our students. So this year, we've launched what we've called the Diversity of Thought program. So it's not limited to any student groups. It's for all of our students, recognizing that diversity across the institution. And the main premise of this is that it's a long-term program. It's getting that kind of buy-in and commitment from organizations. I think Lucy and Josh highlighted so well. You know, it takes some time to build those relationships with students and universities. And for our students, providing insights in their final year about a graduate scheme is not necessarily going to get them through that process. They need to know in their first year how to prepare for the summer internships that are often feed into the graduate programs. So it's a 2-year program. It's based very much on mentoring and work experience. So the reason it's 2 years is you know, we had a study which showed that 75% of our students who accessed mentoring in their second year achieved highly skilled employment, as opposed to 61% that accessed it in their final year. So there's really strong evidence to show that students need that longer term kind of progression. So it's a program that we create bespoke with employers. Usually students apply in their first year and they'll complete the program in their second and third year. It's not very onerous from an employer's perspective. What we require is a mentor from the organization, some element of work experience. So that could be work shadowing, I mean, ideally a paid internship, but some element of the students getting an idea of the culture of the organization and the expectations and the values. To provide industry insights. So post-pandemic, that could have been an on-site visit, meeting some people from different teams, and some insight into recruitment practices. So obviously for employers, the advantages of the program is to sort of gain a sort of a close experience of working with our students, helping to provide that mentoring to sort of guide them and create a sort of a talent pipeline, which is needed. It's quite flexible. We provide a lot of support, and you know the university can also help develop early talent programs if required. The Office for Institutional Equity can provide advice on recruitment processes to make sure that they are fair and inclusive. And for students, the benefits are obvious. Obviously, having a mentor, and you know the program is supposed to really tackle the barriers that students face from widening participation backgrounds, and that's lack of social capital. So building those sort of networks through the mentoring. Sometimes students come in with a lower standard of secondary education. So as Lucy said, sort of catching up educationally and making sure that the barriers are not there in terms of their UCAS points, and it's giving them a chance in their first year to prove themselves academically. Confidence, building their confidence. What we found is if we present opportunities to students last minute, our students, you know, from Russell Group universities, they may be sort of jumping at these opportunities and very quick to react because they have the confidence. Our students do need a little bit more building up, longer term kind of commitment, coming in to speak to students from their first year, not waiting till the final year. And also looking at recruitment processes. So we use the hackathon model, and we've created something called the Talent Hack. So we use this just for events to promote organizations. Some organizations that we're working with Amazon Web Services on our Diversity of Thought program, and they're actually having their event today, which is it's a hackathon event. So students get the advantage of the experience. So we design the event in collaboration with the employer, and it's usually based on some live business challenges. So for the organization, they get quite a lot of ideas out of the event. And it's a really great way for students to showcase their talent in a non-traditional recruitment style. It's a bit more casual, and students work in groups, and organizations get to kind of sort of observe them and see how they behave in different settings. And for students, they get an authentic insight into working for an organization and some good transferable skills. And just to provide an example of how we usually create these, we would collaborate with an organization, design the hackathon to give students clear steps and support within the hackathon to kind of showcase their talents and put their best side forward. And as I said, sometimes these events are just a great way to raise that visibility of an organization, and we can sometimes provide prizes, but sometimes it is actually used as a recruitment and selection process. Just to highlight another scheme and another initiative where we've sort of tried to provide our students with access to organizations, and that's the internship scheme that we run. So that we've been running this for around 6 years, and the university funds interns to work both internally at UEL and with external organizations. It's a great scheme, really popular, and it's flexible for employers. So we do all the recruitment, they're on our payroll, we pay the students London Living Wage, and organizations get to work with our diverse students. You know, it might not be in time with their summer internship, so it's a lot more flexible, and it's a great way to, it's a recruitment tool, looking for future talent. A lot of our interns do get taken on for the long term, also bringing some novel ideas and just giving you an experience of students from UEL and working with those students and the needs and how to support them. These are just a couple of quotes. So Mayor's Fund for London have worked with us on the scheme for some time, and they have taken on one of the interns full time, and they found it really valuable and a great way to support students and really insightful. And there's a quote there from one of our students who's highlighted the mentoring aspect, and also that it sort of really helped her to finalize her personal development plans. And just a couple of stats. So students engaging with our scheme were 13% more likely to achieve graduate level employment and 14% more likely to progress to the next level of their degree. So just to end off, I just wanted to highlight, I mean, this is almost a presentation in itself. So I've really just taken some key highlights. One of our academics has just completed a study called Beyond Adversity, and she was looking at sort of adversity that students face coming into University of East London. So there was a group of 858 first year students who participated, and the themes were around personal circumstances, childhood experiences, stressful life events, resilience. So just to highlight a couple of findings from the research. So 27.5% of the students surveyed have children, 12.1% work more than 30 hours per week, 25% of those students work more than 20 hours per week. So I think just this sort of highlights the other responsibilities and time commitments that our students face. This is one of the reasons that we have embedded our employability module, and we do try to embed placements modules and as much as we can into the curriculum so that all students have an equal chance of securing these opportunities. Oh, sorry. Oh dear. Okay, I'm going forward. Sorry, Kate, can you, I can't seem to see the forward and back buttons. Oh, there we go. Got it. There we go. So just another slide. There was one question around stressful life events that had caused a strong burden in the last 6 months. And more than 50% of our students had faced financial problems. And the last sort of insight from the study is it was really looking at adverse childhood experiences, which include physical abuse, emotional abuse, exposure to domestic violence, living with family members with severe mental health issues. So 4 in 5 of our students had reported at least one adverse childhood experience. Half of our students reported 3 or more. 1 in 5 reported at least 6 adverse childhood experiences, and Black students reported more adversities and discrimination than other groups. So this just sort of really highlights the additional responsibilities and the challenges that some of our students have faced coming into universities. And obviously this is not exclusive to UEL, this can happen at Russell Group universities, but part of the study was actually looking at this student group compared to the general population and also compared to one Russell Group university, and the percentages were significantly higher at UEL. So I think, again, been touched on about the fact that the pandemic, has amplified social mobility issues and will make it even harder for widening participation students to access good graduate level employment. So, we are trying to build on this. We are going to be launching an early talent industry advisory board and working a lot closer with organizations to really sort of tackle these problems. And I think, looking at the longer term view and trial and error and, looking at different engagement methods so that we can sort of get it right. But yes, thank you for the opportunity for speaking. It's been really great. I'll hand over.
Thank you, Charisse. And I think that was a really interesting presentation. I think just even at the first few slides at the beginning, sort of understanding some of the stats that you shared at the beginning really sort of shows how I think, you know, by engaging the university like yours can really make a sort of, I suppose, sudden and positive impact in the profile and sort of dynamic of candidates that might be applying for roles. So it's a really interesting presentation. Thank you. I'm just keeping half an eye on the time. We've now got a short video from a candidate that's recently been offered a graduate position at Ofwat. Ofwat is a client that we've been working with for a number of years, and they're hugely passionate about having a fully inclusive attraction and recruitment process. And hopefully Harry's story will resonate with many of you. So let me just quickly upload this video, and hopefully we can see Harry's video here.
Hi, my name's Harry and I'm a third-year student studying economics at the University of Sussex. I'm really sorry for not being able to attend live, but I hope that I can explain a little bit about my job search as a non-Russell Group student this year. Now for me, choosing where to go to university was a real multifaceted decision, and being the first member of my family to attend higher education, I really wanted to make sure that my choice was a correct one. I travelled with my mum and dad to visit a wide variety of universities, both Russell and non-Russell Group, and also considered some of the degree apprenticeships offered by companies. And it feels poor form to be listing GCSE grades now that I'm 21, but for context, I'd achieved 7 A stars and 4 A's whilst in school, and think there was a degree of pressure to set my sights high up on the league tables. However, for a variety of personal reasons, I eventually decided to firm Sussex and arrived in September 2018, having achieved A star, AB at A level. Its Brighton location felt exciting, with good links to my home in London, and with a strong interest in development economics, the Partnered Institute for Development Studies made Sussex a real compelling choice for me. And looking back, I've really enjoyed my time at Sussex. I'm on track to graduate with a first and have bolstered my CV with like a wide variety of professional internships and extracurricular learning opportunities. Unfortunately, I have found my recent search for a graduate role relatively challenging, although I'm sure that the pandemic has contributed significantly towards a particularly arduous job market. I often found that despite fulfilling or even exceeding many criteria, a lot of positions would reject my application at really early stages after some consideration. And I have a feeling that in many cases, my university might have been a factor. I was really lucky to eventually reach the assessment centre stage of the Ofwat Graduate Development Programme, and the process, managed through Cohesion, had involved a video interview and numerical and verbal reasoning tests. And I've really begun to target jobs that offered these stages, since they offered opportunities to demonstrate like a sustained personal capability away from the single snapshot of a one-page CV. And I was really nervous, but luckily my assessment centre presentation was successful. And I think I've really benefited from the hour-long one-to-one preparation session with a member of the team at Cohesion, because I felt it sort of leveled the playing field across candidates with different university career services. Given the opportunity to meet with and present myself to my fellow colleagues at Ofwat was exactly the opportunity I needed. And I'm really grateful that my CV hadn't been simply filtered for not fulfilling an arbitrary league table cutoff. I'm now looking forward to beginning the programme at the start of September and putting my degree to some real good use. Thank you all for listening.
So hopefully you found that of interest. I contacted Harry halfway through last week to see if he'd be able to contribute something, and I'm so glad that he did. I think he's with us today. So from Cohesion, a really genuine thank you to Harry for taking the time to record that for us. What he's really clearly articulated here are the exact reasons why organisations can benefit by being more inclusive when it comes to which universities to engage with, and the benefit of having a proactive outreach strategy in place for universities. I'm really pleased for Harry, and I think he's about to embark on a really exciting journey at Ofwat. What we haven't seen, though, is all the work that has gone on behind the scenes to make sure that Harry and other candidates like him had equal opportunity throughout the process. Harry talks about the support that Cohesion have provided through each and every step of the process, and it's just putting the candidate at the centre of what we do that makes this campaign and others like it successful. Now, I've pulled together a few quick points and very high-level overview specifically on the campaign to demonstrate the various steps that we went through to ensure the campaign was delivered successfully. I'm not going to go through all of these one by one, but obviously, looking at the advertising and attraction, the use of inclusive wording, localized engagement targeting specific universities. We hosted a series of evening webinars to target organizations. Those were co-branded, and we were fortunate to get senior stakeholders from Ofwat in attendance. When it comes to the actual recruitment process, Katie just clicked through, again, that sort of best practice continues. Removal of barriers, and I think Lucy obviously mentioned this earlier with GSK, from sort of what had traditionally been 2-1 being reduced to 2-2. Inclusive recruitment process, the tracking of applications and data to spot where underrepresented groups fall out of the recruitment process, and critically, the interventions that are put in place during that recruitment process. And as Harry mentioned just there, the one-to-one interview coaching and assessment centre preparation support. If we just click through to the next slide, Kate, that doesn't stop, that support doesn't stop at the end of when an offer is made. At Cohesion, we provide a very detailed and comprehensive pre-boarding and onboarding module where we continue to engage and sort of connect, I suppose, the candidate to their future employer. So what does it all look like at the end of the day? If we look at the output specifically for this campaign, for a campaign that was looking to onboard just 10 economist roles, Cohesion received applications from 148 universities, of which 130 were non-Russell Group. And in terms of the applications, 63% of total applications came from non-Russell Group universities. And that, I think, is a testament to the amount of work and nature of the work that had gone on behind the scenes for this campaign. So coming to the end of our time today, so just in conclusion, we all know that recruitment is being dominated by technology. Whilst Cohesion utilises various forms and platforms to improve processes where we can, we feel that the engagement and the relationships that we've harnessed with both Russell and non-Russell Group universities and the levels of human-based support and engagement throughout that process gives the rounded and supportive edge to clients working with us that really drives inclusivity and diversity into the mix. So that about concludes today's webinar. A huge thanks from me to Greg, Joshua, Lucy, Charisse, and of course Harry for their time in contributing towards the event. I believe the event's being recorded, so if anyone would like to receive a copy of it or even find out more about Cohesion and how we can assist with this or other areas of your various early talent intakes, please feel free to get in touch. And I think we've literally got 2 or 3 minutes now that hopefully we can go to some of the questions that I know everyone's been posting throughout the event and hopefully answer some of those points. And I think, Debs, if you're with us now, you're going to manage the question and answer session. So Debs, over to you.
Thank you, James. Yeah, certainly going to try my best. I've spotted that quite a few of the questions have been answered in the chat, so thanks very much for jumping on to do that. There was one for Lucy that I spotted from Chris from the Cabinet Office, so thank you very much for sending that through. Lucy, I wondered if you could maybe respond to this one. It was just around how you're hedging your bets around the virtual campus work versus the uncertainty around obviously when face-to-face is going to be back up and running, and how effective you're finding that kind of virtual campus attraction.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm sure you can understand why that one I didn't answer in the chat, because I thought it's a trickier one. It's a trickier one to go through. I think honestly, because we're very much in discussions around that. Literally yesterday in a team meeting, we were talking about what's the approach you want to take. And I think from an inclusion perspective, I think virtual is great, that it allows people to join who are maybe very dispersed. It allows us to be really targeted. As Josh said, it allows us to attend a lot more events when you haven't got to factor in all of the travel. So I'm really confident that virtual will be a massive part of what we do going forwards. But we do recognise that for a lot of students, it isn't the same experience, and perhaps particularly for people that might be less confident, might have had less experience engaging with employers. Sometimes face-to-face is an easier environment to encourage people to build up the courage to ask questions. So, and makes it easier for them, you know, to sort of dip in and out of something. So I think we will see a bit of both. And our engagement has been really positive. I remember, Josh, I remember you telling me about an event you did where you kind of got through this long presentation that feels always a bit kind of anonymous when you're presenting. You can't see any of the people you're presenting to, and you think, is anyone going to ask any questions? We've got like 10 minutes now. Is it going to be a long ringing silence? And I think you said there were like 400 questions queued or something like that. So we are seeing people engage and ask questions. So that's been really positive. So I'm sure it will be blended in future. I think there absolutely is a place for face-to-face, and every student is different and will prefer things differently. So we'll reach a broader audience by doing both. But my feeling at the moment is probably more virtual than face-to-face.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucy. That's absolutely great. And apologies for almost asking to put on the spot, but there was a really great conversation in the chat between Ben, I noticed Ben Williams from STEM 10. I wondered, Ben, whether you might just be prepared just to discuss that comment in a little bit more detail now. You were obviously making some really useful points about the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, hi everyone. Glad I put on my shirt. So yeah, I think there's some really interesting research with the Avon and Somerset Constabulary, which looked at situational judgment tests and how in the administration instructions and when you invite people to take the assessment, if you encourage them to get into the mindset of already being in the role and already serving their community and acting in a positive way, what they found was that it started to not just eliminate group differences in terms of progressing to later stages of the process, but it also eliminated group differences in performance on the actual tests. And the rationale for that is that there are potentially these interfering thoughts, whether it's imposter syndrome or whatever it might be, that are getting in the way of someone being able to perform to their full capacity. And I think these unconscious cognitive biases can really come into play. And the example we were talking about there was around venue. So you can imagine someone who's coming up the escalators at Canary Wharf, ready for their assessment day, and they're confronted by all these people in pinstripe suits and wonderful premises that might be a completely alien world to the one in which they've been kind of raised and brought up in. So in a desire to impress and to put on a wonderful show, it can actually have the converse effect that actually you're triggering unconscious biases, which interferes with their performance on the day, makes them more hesitant in interview question responses, makes them more withdrawn in group exercises. So yes, the move to a virtual environment, I think, is going to have more wider reaching benefits than just convenience and logistics. I think we could well see it helping on group differences.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate that. Apologies again for popping you straight on the spot there. And then I think if we've got time, James, just maybe just for one more, just picking up on a question from Katie at Virgin Media, which was directed more to you, Greg, actually. So just around selecting target universities, Virgin Media looking obviously at a range of factors, including those university rankings, as well as gender split, percentage of students with disabilities, underrepresented backgrounds, etc., etc. But the majority of their final target list, after considering the factors, do tend to end up being the Russell Group or Red Brick. So her question was around what other factors could we consider to provide justification for including those non-Russell Group universities in the core target list, where there's been little success in terms of converts from an application to offer in the past. Don't know if you have any thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think it would be, I think just to develop some of the thoughts of one of the previous contributors who said it's about developing a longer term, closer relationship with the university rather than just having a transactional relationship potentially and seeing the conversion rate not being particularly high. I think it would be, obviously there are time limits that colleagues will have, but just trying to work with the university, as you know from this call, UEL is very good at that, to try and explore the reasons why the conversion rate may not be so high, as the Social Mobility Foundation suggests, perhaps for those students who show talent and promise but aren't finally recruited, perhaps offering them just some sort of short internship or some development work with the firm, so that potentially they may be better positioned the next time that they apply for the professional graduate role, that they might be able to succeed. So I think it was it's just seeing it less transactionally and perhaps trying to develop a relationship with perhaps some target universities to see whether the factors that are affecting the conversion rate are genuine ones, or whether they are to do with confidence, imposter syndrome, all the things we've been discussing, lack of just some of the sort of social capital that is obviously sometimes a challenge for some students from modern universities and some others, of course.
Great, thank you ever so much, Greg. James, I think most of the other questions we've managed to answer in the chat, and I'm really conscious of time, so it may be that we collate those and send them out afterwards.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we'll collate some of those questions and answers as well, and as a form of sort of follow-up, share the responses with everyone who's attended today. So on behalf of Cohesion, thank you everyone again for taking the time to attend, and for also our panelists for taking the time to contribute. So yeah, thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.